Hi everybody. We're going to be taking a few minutes today to talk about intelligence testing. I find that this is a topic where there's often a lot of questions as well as a lot of misconceptions. And one of those big misconceptions often has to do with how intelligence is calculated. A lot of people have learned in other classes about the old tests that would use a mental age and a chronological age. No modern test calculates intelligence scores that way. Instead, there are more than one modern test out there, but any test you look at is going to use norms. So what's going to happen is that they're going to collect data on what questions people can answer at given ages. And when you take an IQ test, your scores are going to be compared with other people that are the same age as you. And we're just going to look and see, do you score about average or above average or below average? And generally speaking, if you graph out the scores of a large number of people, what you're going to get is something called a normal curve. If you've ever heard of a bell curve, it is the exact same thing. But a normal curve looks like this. Now, there are a lot of numbers on this screen. I do not need you to go memorizing all of these numbers. What I do want you to take away from this is, first of all, to look at that dark blue section in the middle, and you can see that about 2/3 of the population is going to have an average or a normal IQ, anywhere from 85 to 115. Then if we go all the way out to the left side of that graph, we see that below 70 is generally the threshold for labeling someone as intellectually disabled, and that is the bottom 2% of the population. If we go to the other side, about 2% of the population will have a score of 130 and up, and that's usually where people start labeling someone as gifted. So this is sort of what you generally need to know about how scores work. The important part is that because norms are based on your age, if someone takes a test when they are young and they take a test again when they are older, their IQ, generally speaking, is not going to change very much. Because, yeah, they've learned a lot in the intervening time, but so has everybody else. So the kid that was right in the middle when he was 5, compared to all the other 5-year-olds, if he takes a test again when he's 10, he'll probably be right in the middle compared to all the other 10-year-olds. And if he was way ahead of everybody else when he was 5, odds are good he's still going to be way ahead of everybody else when he is 10. So IQ tests are useful for certain things. They are very good at predicting educational outcomes. So if you want to predict somebody's GPA or their SAT scores, IQ tests are very good for that. They're less useful at predicting job success, because job success now we also are going to be looking for other characteristics like your personality. Are you a jerk? Are you organized? Can you handle stress? And those will influence job success, but they're not going to be scored on an IQ test. And IQ tests are really not good at predicting personality, happiness. Are you going to have a happy romantic relationship? IQ tests are not very good predictors of that. So they're useful for what they do. You just have to keep in mind that there are limitations. And so, like I said, the main advantage of using intelligence testing is that if they are used appropriately, and that's a very big if, but if used appropriately, they can help place kids in the right place in school. We can recognize those kids who need extra attention. They're struggling in a particular area. They can be used to help as one piece of information to diagnose a learning disability, to diagnose attention problems. They can help us identify those kids who are really gifted and who need extra challenge so that they're not sitting there bored out of their minds in school. However, it is important to know that no matter how good the test is, it is one piece of information. And scores can change based on stuff that's not intelligence. Maybe a kid was a little bit tired on one particular day, or just wasn't in a good mood, or didn't know that one vocabulary word that happened to pop up on the test. So these tests are useful for looking and saying, is someone generally really above average, or really below average, or right in the middle? But if one person has an IQ score of 129 and the other has an IQ score of 130, we should not, just based on that, say, oh my gosh, the one kid is gifted and the other kid is not. 1 point difference is meaningless in practical terms. But sometimes people get really hung up on the number and they forget that it is only one piece of information. It's also important to be careful about how we use these test scores, because if somebody learns their test score, this may become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And sometimes that's a good thing. They say, wow, I'm smarter than I thought, and maybe now they work harder in school. But they also might look and say, oh, I didn't do very well. I'm kind of dumb. Well, I might as well just give up now because I'm dumb. And so now maybe their grades go down, and it was because of their expectation and not because of their intelligence. We also have to keep in mind that these tests are not perfect because they can be biased in either subtle or not so subtle ways against people who are not part of the majority culture. And this can be due to the individual questions, but it can also be about the structure of the test in general. So for example, if a kid comes from a cultural background where they are encouraged not to brag in front of adults and not to show off, then when they start getting harder questions, they might start telling the tester, oh, I don't know the answer. And actually they do know the answer and they're just trying not to brag in front of an adult. Well, if that's the case, we're now going to underestimate that kid's intelligence because of the way that the test is set up. There are also challenges where if someone is not, say, a native English speaker, then this might hurt their score, but the problem is the language, not their underlying intelligence. And so over the years, there have been some efforts to develop what are called culture fair tests. And I'm going to give you an example here. This is one particular test where the goal is to do pattern recognition and figure out which of the figures on the bottom should go over that question mark in order to complete the pattern. And so the nice part here is that as long as somebody understands the instructions, they can do the questions themselves without having to know a whole lot of English. So these are intended to be culture fair tests. In reality, it's probably fairer to call them culture reduced tests, because this will get at the language barrier, but for example, it won't address that question of a kid not wanting to show off in front of adults, and that can be a lot harder to address. And unfortunately, I don't have an easy way to do that. If I did, I would sell my ideas and make a killing. So hopefully this all makes sense. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me in class or to send me an email. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful day.